Hi, my name is Autif Kamal, and this is episode 36 of Be Logical. This episode is about how China is, quote, outsourcing pollution to poorer areas of China. When I say outsourcing, I mean that factory construction projects are more so concentrated in poorer areas of China than the wealthier areas. And I'm getting this information from Christina Larson, who wrote the article Rich Chinese Provinces Outsource Pollution to Poor Ones. She wrote it for Business Week. There have been attempts to build factories in Xiamen, Dalian, Ningbo, and Kunming, but a lot of those construction projects were put on hold due to protests. And they have been protested because these factories are just hazardous to their health as far as the air quality is concerned. I can't go over all of these areas of China, but I can definitely go over some of them, or a lot of them. In mid-May of this year, in Kunming, one of China's wealthier areas, there was a 2,500 person protest for the construction of a petrochemical plant. They were protesting the construction of this plant because it would be hazardous to their health as far as their air quality is concerned. And it would be hazardous wherever it's built as long as there are people living near that petrochemical plant. Before I continue, I got the information for this protest in Kunming from Jennifer Duggan, who writes for The Guardian. The name of the article is Kunming Pollution Protest is Tip of Rising Chinese Environmental Activism. Now, if this petrochemical plant is built, it would produce 500,000 tons of paraxylene, also known as PX, and 10 million tons of crude oil. Now, paraxylene, it's possibly cancerous. It may have carcinogens. It's definitely poisonous, and crude oil is toxic upon contact or being inhaled. Whether paraxylene is toxic upon being inhaled is not known to me, but it's possible. I'm getting this information from Chevron Phillips Chemical Company. The name of the documents that I got this from are Material Safety Data Sheet and the Product Stewardship Summary Crude Dicyclopentadiene. So it's unknown whether this protest was successful because I don't think it's entirely been resolved yet, but what we can definitely say is that it's definitely delayed the construction of this petrochemical plant. Now, in Ningbo, there's a similar situation where 1,000 protesters succeeded in preventing the construction of a petrochemical plant by the company known as Zhejiang. I'm getting this from The Guardian. Name of the article is Chinese Protesters Clash with Police at Chemical Plant Demonstration. So we definitely know having that massive size of protesters stopped a petrochemical plant from being built. In Shanghai, again, there was 1,000 protesters who objected to the construction of a lithium battery factory in the Songjiang district. This lithium battery factory would have been built by Hefei Guozhuan High-Tech Power Energy Company Limited. Because of the protests, Hefei gave up on the construction project. So again, the protesters were successful. In Beijing, in January 30th of 2013, 103 factories were shut down. These factories pertain to metallurgy, building materials, and chemicals. I'm getting this information from the Global Times. Name of the article is Beijing Orders Factory Shutdown, and it was written by Yin Yaping. And just going back, I want to clarify that both Beijing and Shanghai are also considered wealthier areas of China. Now, Guizhou, if I'm pronouncing that right, is another area of China, but it is on the bottom of the lists of rankings as far as GDP goes. My basis is Wikipedia, but unfortunately I couldn't find the exact sources that they got this from, so I can't substantiate it for you. So it's up to you whether you want to believe this or not. But as far as the production of cement, electrolytics, aluminum, and factors in coal is concerned, there's been a 14.8% growth since last year. I'm getting this also from the Global Times. The name of the article is Gizho Yunnan see rapid rise in the GDP. It was written by Chen Yang. And also, just to give you a comparison of the GDP of Beijing versus Gizho, the GDP in 2011 for Beijing was 174 billion. That's the nominal GDP. And the GDP for Gizho, the nominal GDP was 90.5 billion. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up GDP is because, now, first off, GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. It represents the amount of value of goods that were produced in either a city or a country. Now, you wouldn't produce such a great amount of goods if there was no one to purchase it. So to me, that Beijing has a nominal GDP of 174 billion means there's a greater demand for those goods than those that are being purchased in Gizho, which to me would also mean that they also there's a greater demand because they also have the money to purchase those products. So you can actually use GDP as an indicator of whether a country has more or less money compared to others. Now, there have been protests in Gizho, but I think they've had a different character than the protests that I've seen reported for Shanghai, Beijing, and Kunming. I looked up like Gizho protests on Google, and these are the protests that I found. I found a lot of protests concerning migrant suicides because of working conditions, minors and other workers' benefits, unlawful violence, and other very much less common protests were for commercial buildings or apartments, and for the rising cost of cafeteria food. Now, based on the protests that I've encountered as being reported on the web, it seems that Gizho is more concerned with like working conditions and like workers' benefits, which totally makes sense because if you're living in a poorer area, then you're going to be more focused on your livelihood. Whereas if you're living better off as far as your finances are concerned, then you can afford the effort and the time to worry about the environment, concerns that would impact your health. But if you're short on cash, the most immediate thing you'll think about is money, which is why I think that protests in Gizho are probably more concerned with workers' benefits and worker conditions. Now, although it totally makes sense to focus on that if their income is not as desirable as they'd like it to be, not at a point, or maybe they don't have as much money as they need. If they do focus on those issues, it's going to open up an opportunity for companies to build factories in their areas while they're distracted with worker conditions and worker benefits. I think that's important because that kind of predicament can happen not just in China but in any country. If you have a bunch of people living in a poor area that and they don't make a lot of money, they'll be more focused on worker benefits and working conditions, since that's what they experience most immediately, as opposed to like the climate. They'll experience the climate too, but it won't be as obvious as work because you go to work every day, and you're forced to go through those motions of working. So yeah, I think that's why poor areas will be more susceptible to be taken advantage of by companies who build factories in their areas. They'll be too distracted to concern themselves with protesting those factories, and so as a result, their health will be at risk. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Be Logical, and thank you for watching and listening.